In this video, we are going to calculate the total distance traveled by user and the SQL performance tips. Hello, I am Jagan. I am posting this video to share my knowledge in SQL with you. If this assists you in your interview preparation anyways, I will be happy. The question we are going to discuss in this video is, we are given two tables, users and rights. We are going to find the distance traveled by each user in the user table. If there is a user who hasn't completed any writes, that means if there is no record in the writes table for a particular user, then their distance should be considered as 0. We are going to talk about various functions we can use to answer this question and the difference between those functions and also the performance points. Okay, let's create the table. So we have the users table which got user ID, first name and last name, and we have a rights table which got write ID, user ID and distance. If you see the users 17, we have a write record, and for 14, 4 and 2 we got write records, but for user 10 we don't have a write record. We'll talk about this null value after a couple of SQL. We create the table. Okay, the table is created. Let's disable. Okay. Okay, so how to get the sum of distance? So basically the sentence here, if there is a user who haven't completed any writes, then the distance should be considered 0, right? So this defines whether we have to use a inner join or left join between the users and the write table. Since we have to show all the users irrespective of the writes, it's basically a left join between the tables. Select from users left join writes on r dot user id equal to u dot user id. So we connect both the tables with the left join, and then we get user id u dot first name, u dot last name, and then sum of write dot distance as distance 1. Since we use aggregation, we just say group by 1, 2 and 3. You can just order by the user ID for better viewing of output. If you see, user 2 got 393, and if you see user 10, since they don't have a distance record, it shows null. But the question is to make it as 0, not showing as null. So how to do that? Let's start with the basic case statement. We just say sum of case when r dot distance is null, then 0, else distance end as d2. Let's run it. So the null becomes 0 when you use the case statement. But the problem here is this case statement will be executed for every record in the table. If you have like million records in the table, this case statement will be applied for all the million records. So it's not a good performance code, right? So what we can do is we can just do sum of the distance, and then you can do case when the sum of distance is null, then 0, else the sum of distance. Okay. Now what happens is it calculates the aggregated field, and then it checks for null value, and then it do a replace with 0, right? So now it's not going to take for all the records, it just takes only for the aggregated fields, right? Only for the aggregated fields it do the aggregation and then check for the null values, but the output is going to be the same. Is there a better way to do it? Yes, there is one more function called COALESCE. Same like the case statement inside and outside, you can use even the COALESCE function. You can just say sum of COALESCE r dot distance and 0. So basically what happens is it COALESCE function will get the first not null column. We can just say if there is another field like r dot writes write distance, and then you go for replacing the null values. First it will check for r dot distance. If it's null, then it go for the next column, and then if that is null, it goes for the third column. So that's the main use of COALESCE function. Okay, as d4. So again this one will be running for every record in the table. So to replace that, what we can do, we can say d5, where we can just do the COALESCE function after the aggregation. Do COALESCE this, and then you get it. Okay, let's disable this so we can check the output. So same performance comes, right? There is one more function called IFNULL. So COALESCE function and IFNULL are having almost the same performance. So what's the difference between this? Sorry, IFNULL. So IFNULL is specifically for MySQL. So it has a bit of performance tip for MySQL rather than COALESCE function. COALESCE function you can use if you have multiple columns to check and get the first not null field, and IFNULL will check the value and just replace it, right? So based on your use case, you can use COALESCE or you can use IFNULL. Okay, fine. But this kind of case statement and putting inside the aggregate function might not work for most of the cases because it's a overhead to the performance. So this is for replacing the null with 0. But can we do that for all the aggregate functions? So basically when you say sum of a column or a average of a column, it will ignore the null value and consider only the records which are not null, okay, by default. But if you concatenate a first name and last name, for example, if you see this user, right, we have first name and last name, we concatenate both and then you go for the full name, then null concatenated with other value is going to be null. We can see that example. Before that, what happens if you use a average function and try to replace the null value with 0? Okay, let's see. Let's go for select this and then average of r dot distance as average 1 from the user table, left join this, group by this. Okay, so when you run this, you see the user 2, he got 196.5 and the user 10, it got null. So for example, if you want to do a case statement, right, case when r dot distance is null, then 0, else end. Okay, if you do this, let's see what happens to the value. So if you see the user 2, the actual average is 196.5. We see this got two valid records, 196, 197. So average is 196.5, which is right. But when I do a case statement and replace the distance with 0 and then do the average, what happens is 197, 196 and 0 becomes 3 records. So 197, 196, 0 divided by 3, right? Then the value becomes 131, which is not expected, right? So whenever you do the function, you make sure you do it in the right way. So this is not the right way of doing it. We can take this and then use IFNULL average of the function and then 0, which is a better way to address this. You can also use the COALESCE function. Okay, fine. Now what happens if you use a concatenation function, and then you do a column which is null and which is not null. Okay, let's try that. Let's get the user first name, last name, and then you just say concatenation of your first name and last name, and you can just have a comma in between for a better look as full name from users table. Let's see what happens. So if you see this, we have the first name and last name, but for user 4 we have a valid first name, but the full name becomes null because we are concatenating a null with the valid value. So how to address this? You can just use IFNULL and then put a blank space and then you can run it. So now you can address the first name, and even the last name is null, we can just get the first name. This comma, you can just put another condition to make sure you address that. Just say case when the last name is null, then a blank, else, comma, end, right? Last name is null. Okay, so you can just handle the comma. Instead of using case statement, you can just use isNull function, and then we can do that too. So we have multiple options. Only thing is we have to know which one suits your requirement, and then you can use it. In the multiple options, you can take the use case and see where you have to put that, and then you can see the performance point of it. Then you can use the function as required. Hope this video helps you. Thank you for watching.